Well, the NFC South is still pretty much the worst division in the NFL. Let's rock. All right, what's going on, guys? My name is Antonio, and welcome back to the All Around Sports Podcast. Today, we are talking about the NFC South. Last few three episodes, I have gone over pretty much all of the divisions. Pretty much, I have gone over the AFC South, and then I went over the NFC North, and then I went over the AFC South last episode. So this time, I'm going over the NFC South, which is pretty much the most wide open division in the NFL. But man, it's pretty much wide open, like that meme I just popped up. But anyways, this is going to be an interesting season for all these teams. But before we get started, I hope you guys enjoy. If you do, please make sure to smash that like button down below. Subscribe if you haven't already. But for now, let's get this prediction started. Starting us off, you got the reigning NFC South champion that surprised a lot of people in the first round and then got ousted in the second round, which is, of course, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The Buccaneers were expected to be at last place and not even close to being in the division contention race because of the loss of the GOAT, which is Tom Brady, which is now who he is now going to be in the announcing role in week one versus the Cowboys and the Browns. I still can't believe that he's coming back. I mean, at least he's not coming back as a player to terrorize us all again. I mean, I would not want to watch the NFL if Tom Brady's going to play again, if you ask me. But anyways, the Buccaneers are still one of the top teams of the division. Their defense is still really decent with Levante David and Antoine Woodfield coming back to the team. Their offense is still really good. You still got Chris Evans. You still got, not Chris Evans, Chris Godwin. You still got Mike Evans. You still got Baker Mayfield, which shocked a lot of people last year. I actually went undefeated in my wild card prediction week last season. Last week in the wild card round, for those of you that don't know, I actually went unbeaten. I predicted every single one correct. So, you be on that. But anyways, the Buccaneers are going to be one of those surprising teams once again. People are already counting them out now that Kirk Cousins in the division, which I'll be going over here in a little bit. But if I have to give him a ceiling, if at worst case scenario, Baker Mayfield doesn't come back as the player that he was this past season, and just absolutely plummets downward and becomes a 7-10 team. That would be my floor record for this team. At best case scenario, they still are in the race. I could see them going 9-8 because that was their record this past year. Their team is relatively decent, but they're going to be going against some tough opponents, including the NFC East. The NFC East is going to be one of the primary opponents, and along with the AFC North. But of course, we'll see what happens. But now let's move on to the next team. Up next is the NFC South runner-up that was very close to making a playoff appearance, which was the New Orleans Saints. The Saints, they went pretty decent this postseason, including getting weapons like Chase Young and also keeping Tyrann Mathieu and Cameron Jordan. This team is going to be really dangerous on defense, which is pretty much why I never underestimate them. Never in my mind do I underestimate this team because of their defense. But Derek Carr is still their quarterback that left the Raiders last year, and it pretty much went bad since he has left Vegas. But anyways, this team, not a lot of people know that they were a top 15 offense last year. They were pretty decent. And Derek Carr was still acting like all upset during the time that he had with them. But this team could be relatively sneaky. But we'll of course see what happens. But as far as the floor goes for this team, if at worst case scenario they end up being a terrible unit, which we'll see if Dennis Allen can lead this team back. But if a floor record, I could see him going in a whopping 5-12. If at worst case scenario. Best case scenario, they end up fighting for a playoff spot. Their defense leads them all the way, and they go 10-7. That would be my ceiling for this team. But of course, we'll see what happens. But now let's move on to the next squad. Up next is the third place team from last year, the Atlanta Falcons. The Falcons, they went a lot deep this offseason. They ended up getting Kirk Cousins in free agency, along with getting, so for some reason, Michael Penix Jr. in the draft.
Huh?
I mean, I was shocked when I heard his name get called. I was shocked. But pretty much every single NFL fan was at that time. But, anyways, this Atlanta Falcons team has the quarterback to get them to the top peak. They now have Kirk Cousins. But this offense has got to prove itself. You got Kyle Pitts, Drake London, and also Bijan Robinson as your top three weapons. You need to be able to show up. You have to be able to score. Your offense was ranked 17th in the NFL last season, and they went 7-10, which I explained when I went over the Pittsburgh Steelers and saying Arthur Smith is not an upgrade over Matt Canada. But anyways, this is going to be an interesting year for the Falcons. But at worst case scenario, Kirk Cousins ends up diminishing from his year this past year because he tore his Achilles halfway through the season, and they end up going a whopping 6-12. I mean at 6-11 because if at worst case scenario it ends up being an absolute bust. But at best case scenario, I could see this team going 11-6. If at best case scenario, and it is what it says it is, what they say they are, which is the top threat in the NFC South, we'll see what happens. But now let's move on to the last team. Next up, and finally, is one of the worst embarrassments from last season and the biggest draft bust of all time. The Carolina Panthers and Bryce Young. That massively disappointed everybody. I mean, for real. He was terrible last year. But, anyways, this Carolina Panther team has gotten a new revamped squad, including drafting three weapons. Xavier Legette, which has had a lot of comparisons to Debo Samuel. Also, they ended up getting Jonathan Brooks from the Texas Longhorns as a running back. Then Jatavian Sanders, also from the Texas Longhorns, as a tight end. This team could be sneaky, but of course, Bryce Young needs to take that next step in his career as a quarterback. You need to take that next step, or else you can end up whopping back to what you were last season.
Michael, don't leave me here. Michael, Michael, help me.
Which I don't think you want to happen again, or worse. But if I have to give them a floor for this, if at worst case scenario, the weapons are absolutely useless and they end up going 0-17. If this does happen, it would be the worst team in NFL history. And if that does happen, we'll see what happens though. But at best case scenario, they end up being relatively decent and end up going maybe 7-10 at the least, because this team is in a massive growing pain because they need to step it up and they need to step up fast. because the NFC South is growing as we know it. But now it is time for my divisional standings prediction. First up, coming in last place is, of course, the Carolina Panthers. No surprise here. Because the Carolina Panthers, we still need to have those growing pains with Bryce Young, and they end up being one of the worst teams in the NFL if they do actually go 17-0, which I doubt. But then in third place, I am very questioning of this, but I'm gonna put in the Saints at third place because this is going to be a very questioning year for the Saints, especially with Derek Carr with a new revamped team. But the Saints I have coming in third. But number two, second place. Oh my gosh, this one has me very twisted and turned. Oh my gosh, I'm gonna put the Atlanta Falcons up there because the Falcons, their offense is better, but they're not as strong as the Buccaneers, which is the number one because I believe that the Buccaneers are going to build off of what they did last season with a new team, new squad. This team is going to be good, and Baker Mayfield, I believe, is going to thrive in this division. But anyways, let me know in the comments what you guys think down in the comment section below. Let me know who you think is going to end up winning the NFC South. But anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, please be sure to smash that like button down below. Subscribe if you haven't already. And I'll catch you all in the next one. Next time we'll be going over the AFC East. And until then, I'll see you all in the next one. Ciao for now.